Without their extensive collection of symbols, they would be unable to retell the same story in novels, movies, TV shows, and even music, and conceal this fact for centuries. The Illuminati are often accused of sun worship, but this is absurd. They have no interest in the ball of fire that traverses our sky. Their only interest is in the god or character that the sun symbol represents. So if you think that this eye or that pyramid is in a random place, think again. Never forget, it's only a symbol, and they can't afford to abuse it. What's the bottom line? While you're watching Saved by the Bell, they see the story of the nations, because they know the symbols. While you're watching The Lion King, they again see the story of the nations, because they know the symbols. With their countless symbols, insiders inform other insiders which character is which relative to the Illuminati's tradition. The Illuminati share detailed information on demons, spirits, angels, and aliens, beings who we, throughout the ages, have called the gods. But most importantly, they share detailed information regarding individual archangels and demons. This tradition also includes their respective histories with each other, personalities, agendas, abilities, lineages, and loyalties. To them, characters like Satan or Archangel Michael or Gabriel, for instance, are not distant and abstract, like they are to Christians, who are given very limited knowledge regarding these individuals. To the Illuminati, these characters are as tangible as politicians or celebrities are to us. Each of these gods has their own history, personalities, etc. But by lining up multiple retellings of these very same characters, and discovering the parts where they all agree, outsiders like us are capable of reconstructing bits and pieces of the Illuminati's inner teachings. And since the beginning of this documentary series, that's exactly what I've attempted to do. This documentary is, for all intents and purposes, the sequel to Hollywood Insider's Full Disclosure, and could have easily been called Full Disclosure 2. Of course, only quote-unquote Hollywood insiders, forgive the expression, are writing these kinds of retellings. So naturally, you'll find repeating themes in stories written by a particular insider, but also a repeating theme occurring in the stories of several writers. Each writer, being bound to a single root story, the gods, can only change the point of view, context, and timeline. Further, it's okay if a different author writes a script for a sequel of a movie. Using the context and characters the first writer decided on, the new writer is likely to write the sequel similar to how the first writer would have. The sequel will be nothing more than the next segment in the timeline, using the same characters, context, and settings the first movie used. Sometimes in movies, things are said, or jokes are told, that seem to make no sense. It may have been a scene or joke intended to be understood only by the illuminated. Some jokes just aren't funny, and some scenes just don't make sense unless you're familiar with the symbols and the root story. If a certain writer in Hollywood writes an insider's retelling, it's altogether likely that much, if not all, of their other stories are retellings too. In this documentary, I'll be reviewing many of the movies that were discussed in Full Disclosure, but instead following the career of those Hollywood storytellers. Once again, it all starts with this movie, The Man Who Would Be King. The Man Who Would Be King was released in 1975 and stars Sean Connery and Michael Caine. It's a film about two Englishmen who hatch a plan to travel to a primitive nation and steal its wealth by claiming to be divine beings. They arrive and are initially met with hostility, but are mistaken for gods by the particular natives they encountered first. They become the immediate leaders of this tribe, and would lead the tribe to victory after victory as Danny sets out to conquer all the surrounding tribes. But before his military victories are complete, Danny, played by Sean Connery, is discovered wearing a charm adorned with the Masonic compass and all-seeing eye, and the remaining people, still unconvinced of his divinity, become believers. Apparently, there was a prophecy among the natives regarding the arrival of a man with such a mark. All the nations unite under his leadership, and he comes to rule the entire land for a brief time. Slowly, Danny starts to forget about his original intentions to get the golden run, and decides to stay and take a wife and remain as leader, while Peachy, played by Michael Caine, decides to take his half of the gold and some soldiers and go home. But before Peachy can leave, Danny is bitten at his wedding and revealed to be only human after he's seen bleeding. During their escape, their gold is wasted, and after a small fight, they are captured and punished. The short story that the movie is based on was written by a member of the Illuminati named Rudyard Kipling more than a century ago, and since the movie's release in 1975, this movie's storyline and concepts have been reused by other Illuminati insiders in Hollywood. A detailed comparison of The Man Who Would Be King and these other movies can be found in Hollywood Insider's Full Disclosure. In this film, I'll simply summarize those comparisons. From the outside, which is the same as not being familiar with the symbols, it appears that the following movies are blatant rip-offs of The Man Who Would Be King and each other. But maybe that's not what's happening. Maybe what's happening is that The Man Who Would Be King, many of the following movies, and countless others, are all based on the same root story, and because of it, simply appear to rip off of each other. Our first offender is Roland Emmerich. Roland Emmerich is a German, born in 1955, openly gay, an art collector, big surprise, but most importantly, he's a pathetic excuse for a writer. Roland directed and in many cases produced and wrote the stories for movies like Independence Day, Stargate, Godzilla, The Day After Tomorrow, 10,000 BC, 2012, and a few other crappy movies. His retelling of The Man Who Would Be King, or the most obvious one, was Stargate. Stargate is about a portal that's been lying in the sands of the Egyptian desert for ages. The portal was discovered by an excavation team, and decades later was activated. The portal, once activated, opened a gate to a planet on the other side of the universe. The group chosen to walk through the Stargate consisted of a small Special Forces squad and an Egyptologist named Danny. Similar to Danny from The Man Who Would Be King, Danny from Stargate is given a charm with an all-seeing eye on it just before departure. After walking through the Stargate, they arrive to a primitive land, whose locals take notice of Danny's amulet and mistake him for a divine being. After a series of events where most of the soldiers are killed, the local people all unite under the leadership of Danny and the remaining soldiers. Eventually, the sun god Ra, the antagonist of the movie, is killed by Danny and Jack. Afterwards, Daniel decides to stay and take a local for a wife, rather than going home through the Stargate with Jack and the remaining soldiers. There are even some scenes in the movie that appear to deliberately draw from The Man Who Would Be King. The second major movie that Roland wrote was Independence Day. Released in 1996, Independence Day, or ID4 as the advertising campaign would come to call it, was a huge hit. Its major draw, like all of Emmerich's movies, was his action and special effects scenes. The script itself was poorly written. In the movie, an alien sneak attack leaves humanity retreating on all sides. A sense of hopelessness sets in as more counterattacks fail. Finally, it falls upon two men to deliver a computer virus to the aliens' mothership in space. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human race is forming a global command structure in order to engage the aliens in a unified way. This global command, led by the American president naturally, finds the aliens' weakness and brings a screeching halt to the alien invasion. The Day After Tomorrow, released in 2004, was everything we've come to expect from Roland